Thank you for joining us today to explore collaboration and efficiency through data centralization. This discussion will focus on a recent implementation of Domo for Hobo Bags, a current client of ours at Blue Moon Digital. I'm AJ Workman, the Chief Revenue Officer and co-founder of Blue Moon Digital. Joining me today are Amy McManus, the Chief Digital Officer, and John Stinnett, the Senior Director of IT from Hobo Bags.
Thanks, AJ. My name is Amy McManus. I'm the Chief Digital Officer for Hobo. I joined the company in January 2020. My responsibilities include the oversight of the DTC business and to help Hobo with its digital transformation. That includes our data project, which we will be discussing today.
Great. Thank you for joining us, Amy. And we also have John Stinnett, who's a Senior IT Director at Hobo Bags.
My name is John Stinnett. I'm the Senior IT Director at Hobo. My main responsibility is to curate the platforms that enable Hobo's digital transformation.
Thank you both for joining us today and taking some time to share your success story implementing Domo. Amy, before we get started, you've worked with Blue Moon Digital and Domo before coming to Hobo Bags. Can you tell us a little bit about your prior experience and how that led to this engagement at Hobo?
Yes. I worked with Blue Moon Digital while I was the head of digital commerce at Kate Spade. Blue Moon Digital brought Domo to us when they automated all of our digital marketing reporting within Domo back in the fall of 2016. Wow, 4.5 years ago. In addition to wiring up all of our digital marketing reports, they also enabled a few pieces of technology that they developed one was called the Revenue Equation app, and also a Salesforce Commerce Cloud connector. That gave us the ability to see hourly sales and inventory in real time. This was really critical, especially as we needed to manage our surprise sale business and manage what was visible on the website against available inventory in real time. Blue Moon was a great partner to me at Kate Spade and continues to be a great partner for us at Hobo.
Thank you, Amy, for that introduction and your continued partnership with us. Wanted to just introduce Blue Moon briefly about who we are. We are a digital consultancy and also a strategic premier partner with Domo. We've been implementing Domo use cases for about 3.5 years now. All of us are located here in Denver, Colorado, and we have really 3 practices under our umbrella. One is a traditional digital agency service. One is an analytics and data science service where we measure, optimize, and predict based on data that our clients give us access to. And then we also have technology solutions, which is where our Domo practice lives. And we work on the business intelligence platforms in addition to other platforms that our clients have. Our Domo practice really focuses on a number of different use cases in retail, which you'll hear about today. We also have clients in the health, beauty, and wellness area. We also work with a lot of branded manufacturers, those who are manufacturing, but also taking it direct to consumer. We do have some real estate companies that we work with directly within the Domo platform, as well as some CPG companies and a number of financial services companies. So we're here as really a facilitator to share the Hobo Bag story with you today. And with that, I'd like to introduce you to Amy McManus.
Yep. Thank you, AJ. Excited to share the brand of Hobo with the audience today, especially for those who aren't familiar with it. Hobo started 30 years ago by our founder, Corinne Ray, and her mother. We are based in Annapolis, Maryland. We make beautiful, timeless leather handbags and accessories, and we are in the process of transforming ourselves from a primarily wholesale-focused business to a DTC-led business. And that was part of the reason why I was brought on. So we're excited to talk a little bit about that journey with you today. We have a video to
Wonderful.
share. Just a small video to show a little bit about the Hobo brand.
All right, well, thanks for that. Again, a very exciting growing brand, and we're very excited to share our digital transformation story with you today. So with that, John and Amy, if you could set the stage for everyone today around your digital transformation journey and what led you to move to Domo, and how did it come about? Love to hear a little bit of the backstory to this.
Sure, I'm happy to kick it off, and then John can weigh in. Um, as I mentioned earlier, Hobo is a 30-year-old brand. It's having its 30th anniversary this year. It's been primarily a wholesale business that's grown over time over the 30 years. As the business grew, I think different data sources or different platforms were added on as needed to support the growth, but there wasn't really a kind of centralized um, plan to be able to see all of the business at once. About 5 years ago, we started an e-commerce business, which required its own data structure, its own implementation, its own platform. As the team grew and the stakeholders grew and the plans for the business grew, we knew that we needed to aggregate the data, surface what's actually happening with the business, and bring it into the light so that we can use it as an asset to drive the business forward instead of making it difficult to read, difficult to unearth. We were spending a lot of time, or the team was spending a lot of time mining data from legacy systems and pulling it together instead of being able to use the data that they were learning to make business decisions to propel the business forward. Up until a year and a half ago, when we took on investors, the audience for the data was very, very small. It was our CEO, CFO, and our head of IT. And as we took on investors and as we've put this, put this effort in place to grow the business, the number of stakeholders and the number of people who need access to the data has grown tremendously. And it needed to be brought into the light. It needed to be made accessible, understandable, so that it could be used to scale the business and grow the business.
Yeah, so going back to our conversation yesterday, John and Amy. So Amy, you're new to Hobo Bags, correct?
Yes, I joined just over a year ago.
And John, you've been with Hobo a much longer period of time. Can you comment on a little bit around the data sources and how it came together to move to a platform like Domo for you?
Sure. So I've been with the company 15 years, and we've been consistently growing in the number of data-hungry people that are consuming the data that we have. And we've found through increased initiative to grow the brand that there was need for additional clarity and a single source of truth for our data.
That was definitely apparent for me when I joined a year ago, is that there wasn't a single source of truth. So for someone who was new to the brand and new to the business, trying to onboard and understand what was really going on became a challenge when there were multiple interpretations of data. For example, how do we actually calculate revenue? What does revenue mean? And I think that we spent quite a bit of time at the beginning just trying to resolve those issues instead of looking forward as to, well, what does that actually mean?
And John, early on in the conversation, there was a comment about the CFO and CEO spending a lot of time building out this particular report. You were part of that 3-person team that would compile this report every day. How did that small team and that focus among the 3 of you really change as Amy and a new e-commerce team and others started to join the business?
We definitely had quite a few reports that we were putting together manually on a regular basis. And one of the problems that we were having was with all the different people that needed to consume the data, pivoting from the way we're used to seeing the data to a new way of looking at it was very difficult and time consuming. And we were not able to respond to the changes in our environment and make decisions as quickly as we needed to.
That's a great setup to the next part of the discussion, which really is around the digital transformation journey that you guys embarked upon. From being there with you as a partner, we really saw 5 major areas evolve throughout this digital transformation. We're going to talk about each of those in a little more detail today. So the first one, and you've heard Amy and John both comment on it, is really the need to define a common language around among not only the pure data itself, but the also stakeholders who are ingesting that data and trying to interpret that data. In addition, we're going to talk about how Hobo went about centralizing and rebuilding the reporting architecture to evolve this small 3-person team that would look at most of the data, to then expand that to satisfy the needs of the other stakeholders that came into the business. Third, we're also going to talk about the importance of engaging the executive team, especially as you get to a proof of concept, so you have that executive buy-in right off the bat. Then, as we round out the discussion, there's an element of show me more. As someone gets their hands on this new data platform that we see within Domo, the need to encourage those folks to explore new ideas and explore different data to continually build upon what that initial project was with this particular implementation. And then I'll let Amy explain this in more detail, but turn it over to the people once we get to an end from the initial project. So with that, let's talk about step 1, defining a common language. Amy, this was really at the forefront and something you saw as you stepped into the organization. Could you expand upon that?
There wasn't a single source of truth when it came to how the business was performing and how everyone was understanding it. One particular example was revenue, which I'm sure to the audience seems silly, like how is revenue not revenue? But there were nuances to the way that it was being calculated so that you could potentially have 3 different answers from 3 different people within the organization. We really needed to work towards defining a common understanding of this is what revenue means. And that was true for many of our key performance indicators. And so we engaged with Blue Moon and of course John, who was critical in this process, to help us establish that language and align on that common understanding, so then we could build reports and business processes around those.
And John, defining a common language, how did you look at that slightly differently than what Amy was seeing?
In terms of building out the infrastructure and helping align everybody on their reports, I was oftentimes tasked with providing certain key pieces of information. And when one department talks about a metric in one way and another department uses that same phrase in another way, it's very difficult to bridge that gap and then have a coherent understanding between the departments. So that's where working closely with each department and identifying exactly what they mean when they say a particular phrase was crucial to being able to have clarity as to what our data meant.
And working with Blue Moon Digital, was there a particular exercise you went through or that the teams collaborated with to define this common language?
Initially, we had a report that we were creating on a weekly basis that we decided to implement in Domo as a proof of concept and to have a single source of truth and have something that we could build on for all of the rest of our implementation.
So, John, I know that there was an exercise we went through as a kind of a cohesive team called metrics mapping. And that helped to really identify all the different definitions that we were seeing, for example, around revenue that maybe the CFO had versus Amy's team had versus the CEO was looking at. And frankly, how it may have been defined coming out of the accounting or finance systems. So that metrics mapping really is one of the first steps we do when we engage in a project similar to yours. How, in hindsight, how did that help align the teams and move this forward?
So AJ, we didn't do a metric mapping actually at all. Yep. We jumped in head first and did working implementation sessions. So there was no metric, and we couldn't do that, honestly. We needed to figure out our data, and in order for us to figure it out, we had to crawl before we walk before we run. Okay, and we were sort of doing a Domo implementation on top of trying to align everybody on all of the metrics.
We in fact used one of those reports to kind of do a metrics mapping, right? I mean, the report was show revenue here, okay, let's define revenue. Show margin here, let's define margin. So it was a very fluid process that I think worked well for us.
So in addition to really identifying and defining all the different terms, as Blue Moon Digital, we use something called the Universal Campaign Coder app that is built on top of Domo to help extend this common language to various digital marketing campaigns, different marketing channels. So we move the cleanliness of that data all the way upstream. So when it does flow into Domo, we can easily create wonderful reports that can be easily understood, and everyone's talking the same language once it's moved down into Domo. And we'll show that, talk about that a little bit more later. Moving into step 2 of the digital transformation project really was about centralizing data and rebuilding the reporting. So John, I know that you were at the heart of this on the Hobo side, and it actually had started before Domo came into the mix. Can you talk a little bit about what spurred that need to centralize and rebuild the reporting architecture?
Prior to implementing Domo, I was spending about half of my time supporting the development and maintenance of reports for our organization. And a big part of my job is to help make the company more efficient and use our data wisely.
If you were talking to someone who's embarking on this journey, what would you say is a best practice to do at this step in your digital transformation project?
Reproducing materials and reports that people use on a regular basis that they already know to be accurate within a new platform shows value of the new tool immediately, and then also breeds confidence in the reliability of the system.
Amy, any thoughts around the centralization and what that was doing for your team, or how your team was providing input to this particular stage?
The impact of e-com on the wholesale business wasn't really something that was ever discussed really at a strategic level. And as the DTC business moved into a hyper growth period and was going to become much more of the share of the business, it was really important for us to be able to look at a high level. How are the wholesale and e-commerce businesses performing together? Where are the similarities? Where are the strengths and opportunities? And how do we use that to make strategic decisions going forward in terms of supporting each of the channels? So centralization took on that kind of meaning at the executive level. And then, of course, just from a more tactical level, for me to be able to have all of the data sources that impact the e-commerce business brought together into this Domo experience for us was amazing and really enlightening for me and for my team to be able to have it in one place.
Excellent. So after we consolidated and centralized the data, then the next step really, as I understand it, and as we saw, was taking a proactive step to engage your executive team in that proof of concept. So with that in mind, Amy, how was the leadership team at Hobo using Domo in this proof of concept stage, and how important in your mind was it to have the executive team engaged at this point?
Right. During the proof of concept phase, it was essentially the CFO, the CEO, myself, and John, so that we could review the data on a daily basis, use it as in conversation about the business, and make sure that we had agreement and alignment on, again, are we clear on what it's saying? Does everyone understand how to use this tool? And I think that just those initial few steps were really critical in establishing, I think, trust with the data, as well as trust with the platform. And it really did help get us all aligned on it. After the four of us reached that phase, we started expanding the distribution of that data to our head of marketing, our creative team, our board. And so the rollout went in that. And now today, pretty much our entire team has access to Domo reports on a daily basis.
And John, from your perspective, how was it involving the CEO, knowing that you were working with the CEO and CFO on the manual reports? Were they accepting of being involved in the POC at this level?
Absolutely. They're very data hungry people, and they themselves were spending a lot of time managing this, and wanted to be spending their time elsewhere. So they were very excited to be able to see things that they were having to do manually be automated.
It was such a light went off, in their minds as to, wow, this is what a data tool can do for us. This is what streamlining the data process can mean for us. It was really, I think, a critical turning point.
That's great. Was there a particular report that you used for the proof of concept that garnered this excitement?
Well, there were two, right? There was the e-commerce daily report, and there was a company-wide dashboard that John could probably speak to. I think the company dashboard in particular was something that was particularly difficult to build. It took conservatively about 7 days to pull all of the data. It was a company-wide dashboard that was published to our board and to the executive team. And it was running the risk, quite frankly, of being outdated by the time it was published. And so John and the Blue Moon team were able to take this as one of the first two uh, reports that we worked on to build it, automate it, and now it's basically created and updated on a daily basis, which is remarkable considering that it at one point took 7 days to build. And then the other proof of concept report that we did was just the daily e-commerce sales recap. And that had to do with traffic, sales, other high-level metrics that we would use to manage the business. And that was a manual report that we were pulling on a daily basis. What was demand, net, returns, margin, as you can imagine, AOV, the typical things that you would expect to see in a daily report, including product recaps. And that, while not anywhere as significant as the previous report that I just mentioned that took 7 days, this was it was 1 to 2 hours a day to pull together this report that now is completely automated, and not only automated to run every day, but it's distributed by email to our entire team every day now.
Moving on to step 4, and this came out in our discussion earlier, Amy, there's this idea of show me more. The minute you opened up that POC and put it in people's hands, tell us what happened.
From my perspective, the team had been data blind. There were obviously a few executives, the CEO, John, our CFO, as we mentioned, that were very involved with the data. Data wasn't really something that was as transparent and clear to the wider organization. And I think as we started to share our Domo project and our data transformation project with the wider team, there was this amazing journey that I feel like I saw everyone go through to become first data aware. Wow, I didn't even know we had that data, right? To then becoming data curious. Wow, what else is there that we can learn about the business? And then ultimately becoming data empowered, because now they are armed with this information and what's actually happening, and then they feel more empowered in what's happening and what they need to do in their own jobs to help drive the business.
And John, how has this encouraging new ideas and all these different folks playing with the data, how has that changed your role? And are you able to handle all these new ideas and requests that are coming? How are you dealing with that?
Sure. So it's been exciting for everybody in the company. They're very happy to have new data sources and to be able to do their job more effectively. We are now speaking the same language rather than everybody having their own version of a report. When we talk, we're communicating about one specific version of the truth, the correct version of the truth, and not necessarily something that is department specific. I was able to consolidate disparate sources of data into a single source of truth. That put all of our teams on the same page.
So Amy, one other thing that came out with the Show Me More was something around merchandising. Can you explain what you found?
So I think that this speaks to what I mentioned earlier, that as our business users kind of went through the journey of becoming data aware, data curious, data empowered, they have been driving really what's next. And how do we how do we take the data that is now accessible to them and push it even further and start to ask questions that we didn't think that could be answered. In merchandising in particular, we were looking at the category level initially only, and now we're able to get down to the SKU level. We're able to, Domo is able to help us do more analysis around color and size and particular subclasses of products that really weren't available to us prior to this exercise. So it has been transformative in that particular case in the way our merchandising team is able to do its job on a day-to-day basis.
Note for our audience today, due to the confidential nature of Hobo Bags, actual Domo dashboards, all revenue numbers and metrics you will see in the following demonstrations are theoretical data for demonstration purposes only and not actual numbers from Hobo Bags. With that said, let's dive right into the first card that we built. So as we engaged with Hobo Bags, they were very keen to understand where they were spending their media dollars, how it was impacting both inventory and sell-through, in addition to what marketing channels were working well and what marketing channels were not working. With those types of underlying needs, we then created the following dashboards.
One of our biggest challenges is seeing what revenue is attributed to each digital marketing channel. We created this card to help our e-commerce and marketing teams see the revenue impact of their marketing campaigns by channel, by day of month. Now, in addition to seeing revenue by channel, we also have a clear view into the total number of orders that are attributed to each channel. This card ties data from our ERP system to our website analytics system and is validated against the order management system. This data helps our marketing team understand which digital channel is most impactful when they use it to prioritize marketing spend and optimization efforts with our partners at Blue Moon Digital. This is one of my favorite cards in Domo. Now I can clearly see how we're doing compared to plan on a daily basis. Before Domo, we were comparing demand plan in a manual fashion by pulling numbers out of our OMS, our ERP system, and our e-commerce platforms each night and analyzing them to see how we were doing. This card is now available to me and our teams each morning before I get to work. It really helps me plan our priorities and see if we're on track or not for the week, the month, and the quarter.
As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, we use our universal campaign coder, which you see here in the Domo App Store, to standardize that common language across all of our digital marketing campaigns. Defining this common language makes downstream reporting easier with clean data coming into Domo directly from the source. We'll see the impacts of this in the paid social dashboard.
One of the most utilized sections of our dashboard analyzes our paid social campaign performance. With this set of cards, we're able to see how specific campaigns are performing across various platforms, and with a common language, it makes filtering by platform and campaign simple. We now have a consistent naming convention for our creatives. Now, Labor Day is spelled the same way every time we run a campaign, which makes the downstream lift to manipulate the data a lot simpler. We can see click-through rates now by the creative we have and the ad type as well as who we're targeting, giving us the ability to tweak future campaigns or campaigns in flight based on our objectives. Our merchandising dashboard gives us more insight than we have ever had before. These cards enable our team to look at what's sitting in inventory and the profitability of that inventory all within one card so that we can decide which bags, categories, accessories are the most profitable that we need to either reorganize on our site or tie a promo to. Having a few promo specific cards allow us to see how specific promos on our site have historically performed so that we can be smarter around when and what promos we should be running. Now we not only need to know which products are performing the best, but how our inventory is holding up compared to sell-through. This card here gives us a list of SKUs that we're projected to sell out in the next few weeks. This allows us to see where we might lose out on sales because we don't have enough inventory. Well, these dashboards that we just went through in Domo help us aggregate so much information that was disparate from inventory, sales, etc. And by pulling it together in this highly visual way, we're able to answer those questions of profitability. We're able to drive towards better answers in terms of sell-through and inventory needs And it ultimately has just made us much more productive at what we do.
So I hope that gave you a quick overview of the different cards we built within the Hobo Bags engagement. We worked with the digital marketing teams, the merchandising teams, the inventory side, as well as the merchandisers and buyers to create the cards that you've seen today. Now we're at the end of the initial project. Obviously, this is an ongoing journey that we're talking about. But Amy, you had the idea of, or the concept of, now we need to turn it over to the people. Can you explain to us what you mean by that?
While this was certainly an executive sponsored, an executive mandated project initially, for it to really be successful and I think transformative for our business, it needs to be as democratized as possible. It needs to be, data needs to be in the hands of everyone, and our business users need to be the ones who keep pushing us forward in terms of curiosity, in terms of analysis of the business, etc. And so what I've found, and I think John would agree with me, is that we were responsible for the initial roadmap. And now what's happened is that we have all of these evangelists within our business now, of people who are data hungry and they want more. So by giving them access to the data and the tools, they are empowered. As I've mentioned before, they are now driving our roadmap forward. They are the ones that are coming to us saying, these are the new reports I need. We need to do this to look at this part of the business. These are the priorities that we need to be thinking about in terms of X, Y, and Z. And it's been quite remarkable when you think about, in a relatively short time, these, for the most part, were users that didn't have access to this data on a regular basis at all. And now they're driving our data roadmap. For me, turning it over to the people was, empowering them to make sure that data becomes part of our culture, to become data curious, data hungry, to data empowered, should be part of our day-to-day culture. And the only way to do that really is to let our business users drive it. And it has been exciting to see. I think it's been incredibly productive. And I think quite innovative. Yeah, that's what I meant by turn it over to the people. They came up with things that I never would have, quite frankly, if I was the only one responsible for the roadmap. I think it's better and richer and ultimately more beneficial for the total business.
So as a last concept, we talked about crawl, walk, run. In the learning that came out of this engagement, both for our team and for your team, this really did hold true. Do you want to comment on what you meant by that?
Implied in this, right, crawl, walk, run, is it's not crawl, walk, stop. It's not, walk, run, end, finish. For me, this implies you keep going. There really isn't an end. And I think that that's important for people who are taking on projects such as these. I think more tactically, or maybe more specifically, when we kicked off our project, it was tempting to want to take all of our data questions and all of our data needs and try to push that into our phase 1 launch or our initial launch. But quite frankly, I don't think we ever would. It would have taken 3 times as long to go live. I don't think it was that effective. So what we ended up doing as an executive team is to say, okay, where are we going to see the most immediate impact or the most immediate win from getting some of this data centralized, aggregated, visualized, socialized? And so we chose a few reports, some of which we've already mentioned, to get those built by, with our team in Blue Moon, and get those finalized, made sure that they were accurate, make sure we had full alignment, and we pushed those out through daily reporting or weekly reporting, depending on the report. And that allowed us to, again, get comfortable with the process, to continue to get comfortable with having data readily available to us, and starting to make that transition of, don't spend your time pulling the data, now spend your time reading and reacting to the data. So we kicked it off in that way, and we had this crawl launch, which was very successful, and then moved on to I guess what John and I were internally calling phase 2, to get the next set of reports up. And really, the walk to the run piece is what I mentioned before. We now are getting more requests from our internal team members and our business users than we can keep up with, right? So the generation of ideas and the desire to keep getting more access to data and more reports is coming at a faster and faster rate, and which is so exciting to see. So I think that it allowed us to start off strong, build a foundation, get everyone comfortable, and then start moving at a faster and faster clip. So that's really my intention when I talk about crawl, walk, run when it comes to this project. As a special thank you to those of you who tuned in today, we'd like to offer you a special discount at Hobo Bags. We're offering 15% off of a full price purchase with code HOBODP2021, and that's valid from now through September 1st.
As a final question, I know there's a lot of things that have come out of your exploration, and I know that there's a few things teed up in the queue at Hobo Bags to add to Domo. Among those are the supply chains up next. There's some additional finance teams that we're looking at. Any other areas where you think are really teed up for success within Domo in the next year?
We are finishing some reporting around inventory. As you mentioned, supply chain is next, and we will always probably have financial reporting to work through. Those are the big ones for now. But again, our reporting roadmap isn't always new reports. Sometimes it's become evolving or enhancing existing reports. So that is one of the things that we're working on, as well as we are able to get access to new metrics or new plan or forecast data. How do we continue to evolve existing reports?
So thanks again for joining us today. On behalf of Blue Moon and Hobo, we want to leave you with a couple of key thoughts to success. First of all, make sure you define a common language across all of the stakeholders involved in your data transformation project. Second, look at centralizing and rebuilding that reporting architecture to facilitate what's coming next, whether it's growth, whether it's new teams, whether it's a new line of business. Third, engage that executive team as early as you can in the process. Their buy-in will make it much easier and smoother for adoption down the road. Fourth, encourage new ideas and data exploration from everyone that's involved in the project. You may not be able to tackle everything in the first project, but it certainly helps you build the roadmap as you move down the line and add more things to your Domo implementation. And lastly, I think these are great words of wisdom from Amy. Turn it over to the people. Let them decide where it's going to go next. They're the ones on the front lines that can make the decisions from the data you are shining the light on. And it really does help the organization move faster and make decisions quicker. So if you have questions, feel free to reach out to Amy, John, or myself. We'd be happy to help you along your digital transformation as you embark on this journey. Once again, I'm AJ Workman, Chief Revenue Officer at Blue Moon Digital, and we'd be happy to help you on your journey around digital transformation.